Welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. I know we had some technical difficulties yesterday, so if you could let me know how it looks this morning. You'll see I'm looking to the side to see if it's not quite as glitchy as yesterday. You know how tech issues work sometimes. The computer decided to die just moments before we were going on air. I'd like to blame it on the wildfires in Canada, but I don't know if we can. So please let me know. Here's my contact information. It's looking much, much better, and I think the audio is actually there. I've got it cranked pretty good, so please let me know. I'd love to hear from you. My apologies for missing yesterday, and my apologies to our guest, Chris Brewer, who's a Deputy County Manager for Steuben County, as well as Marie Myers Shearing, the Planning Director for Steuben County, because they have input sessions on the comprehensive plan, the first ever comprehensive plan in Steuben County history. And they had 2 input sessions yesterday, but it's still worth highlighting, in my opinion, that there are, oops, that's the wrong one. There are still 2 more coming up soon, tomorrow, if you see on the bottom of your screen in Wayland, as well as on Thursday at the Steuben County Annex Building in Bath. It's from 2 to 6, and just because we missed the interview, and again, my apologies to our guests who were so nice to come in and did a wonderful job, and that's why I feel bad that we could not have them on the air. But what you do is you stop in from 2 to 6, you see the 9 major focuses of the initiative, and you basically take stick-it notes and say, well, I like this, I don't like this. It's very easy. There's no lectures or something like that. It's you just come in and have your voice heard, because if you know about the original input sessions, that's where they came up with the, I don't know if rough draft's the right term, but the initial steps for this comprehensive plan, where it is, okay, these are the things we want to focus on in Steuben County. So if you are interested, I think it's a great opportunity for us as a community to have our voices heard if you live in Steuben County, and I wanted to mention that. Other breaking news, and that's why I wanted to start right off and apologize to them, but in breaking news, if you have not seen yet, Mike Pence did kick off his 2024 run this morning, just hours ago, not even hours ago, releasing, and this is not a knock at all, releasing a video much in the way that Biden did. He said in the video, "Today our party and our country needs a leader that will appeal, as Lincoln said, to the better angels of our nature." This was a video announcement. "My family and I have been blessed beyond measure with opportunities to serve this nation. And it would be easy to stay on the sidelines. But that's not how I was raised. That's why today, before God and my family, I'm announcing I'm running for the President of the United States." So that's former Vice President Mike Pence, officially just kicked off about an hour ago. And that comes on the heels of Chris Christie's announcement yesterday, which we'll talk a little bit more about. I do like the fact that Chris Christie, well, you know what? We'll get into it in a little bit. I don't want to. I want to choose my words in a very specific way, but I do think it's very interesting that the media is already using him in a way to not to highlight his campaign, but as an opportunity to go after the former president. So we'll talk about that on the program. Again, if it looks okay this morning, I'd love to have you let me know. Volume's still a little low. Okay, I'm going to crank my end. But much better, I'm seeing here. Voice working good. That the low volume might be me. Much better. All right. I can hear you. Good. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for letting us know. We are back up and running. It was just some technical issues. You know how computers work sometimes. They like to do that at the most inopportune time. So we've got to take a short break. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. I'm your host, Frank Acom, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. I know everyone's talking about the smoke, and I don't know if you can see it, but just how odd it looks out there. Yeah, it probably doesn't show up on camera, but just the orange. I know that's been a major issue. I saw on the news just last night that it's the equivalent, if you're out there working in the smoke, it's the equivalent to 3 to 11 cigarettes in that day. I thought that was Kind of interesting and a weird way of looking at that. Okay, playing some catch up. Because we did miss the last 2 days because of tech issues again. And thank you for being so nice and understanding, first of all, and also sending in, hey, this is what I'm seeing, and just helping us along as we were trying to figure out the various settings. A couple of housekeeping things. Monday was the grand premiere of Stars on Mars on Fox. And that's maybe if you're seeing the normal screen. Look over here, you see the big, I don't know if you can see it, but it's a big space helmet. And over here they sent us, remember these, the freeze-dried ready to eat space food? It used to just be what, ice cream sandwiches or something like that. Now they sent us a whole bunch of them. Well, I was going to taste them on the air just for fun for breakfast, but maybe we'll wait till next Monday to remind you that that's on Fox now at 8 and is doing very well. Another bit of catch up, because we received a lot of emails actually starting Friday on various topics that we had been discussing, and I don't like to overlook them. I know sometimes we don't get to all of them, and I apologize, but I thought there was a couple good points on both sides, not just what maybe I was saying, but also just some different points of view on various topics that we were discussing. So here's the first one, and it's very appropriate this morning. The I, for one, am tired of hearing we are short-staffed, understaffed, because we keep settling for less and paying more. And meanwhile, if in fact employees were offered their jobs back after COVID, and I have a reason to question whether they were or not, I just can't help this nagging feeling that we are being replaced in the workforce. And the delay in hiring back has allowed time for new hirees to be trained to do our jobs, and the jobs will be given to undocumented individuals at lesser pay, once again padding the pockets of big businesses. I don't fault anyone who's authentically trying to come to the U.S. to make a better life, but I do fault our government for allowing this unconscionable influx. But we have citizens struggling big time. And that was so appropriate. I'm actually glad we didn't get to read this one yesterday, because The Atlantic has a piece, Atlantic Magazine, where the crux of their argument is the feds, the federal government, uses migration to cut wages. The idea that labor is just another commodity to them, like wood or oil, and Americans are best off when it is plentiful and cheap, said the article. Now, if you're not familiar with the article, they're very pro-migration. It's Establishment Magazine. So tying in with that comment that we received, I believe on Friday. So thank you. You can always contact me if you'd like to weigh in on the various topics we discussed. If you're just tuning in, Mike Pence did announce that he's running for president. It doesn't come as a surprise, but he made it official yesterday. Of course, Chris Christie announcing, taking it as an opportunity to make many, many digs at the former president, President Trump. So we will talk about that in just a moment, because I have another comment from a viewer. And as I said, you don't always have to agree with me. I'm not always just putting up, I guess, emails and texts from people that have the same mindset as me. And here's an example. And unfortunately, I don't have it up on the screen, and I apologize. Sir, on the clean slate law, my opinion on the way you defined it isn't correct. The clean slate law, we talked about this quite a few times, especially when we had, Assemblyman Phil Palmisano. I think we might have had a chance to mention it with the former Congressman Joe Semplinsky. But the Clean Slate Act is going through Albany now, which I'm going to get an update on that in just a moment, where it erases certain things from a criminal record. So let me go back to what this viewer had to say. Clean slate is about ending perpetual punishment for the person who made one mistake, completed everything the judgment required, and in most cases above and beyond that, and still can't obtain employment for a career because of that mistake. I'm not referring to the career criminal in and out of jail. Good point. As with almost anything to do with the law, there's more to it. But please give a person a chance. Your referral to them as cons certainly paints a poor picture, literally. And I appreciate that. I think I was at a loss for words. And I know that con made it sound very slanted. So I appreciate that being brought to my attention. And again, it was appropriate because on the various news sources I go to today, there is an update on that from Albany, and then we will get on to the presidential race. So please go ahead and weigh in, and we've got to take another short break, and we'll talk about the Clean Slate Act coming up in just a moment. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I know we always try to have right around this time the M.A. Neal Financial Services section of our program where we have an interview. Unfortunately, because of technical difficulties we had yesterday, I wasn't positive we could have a guest in, so I didn't want to have anything scheduled. I will be making that up tomorrow and Fridays. We're going to have a lot of guests, but I do want to again apologize to the guests that we missed yesterday about the input session coming up. And here, I keep doing that. There is your information. Okay, obviously we missed Tuesday, but there is still an opportunity tomorrow to be a part of that comprehensive plan. That's out of Steuben County, of course. So I want to thank our guests, even though they weren't able to be on the program, Chris Brewer, the Deputy County Manager for Steuben County, and Marie Myers-Sharing, the Planning Director. And of course, thank you always to Mary for helping set these up. So I apologize we could not have that happen, but I wanted to promote that one more time and to thank them for being on the M.A. Neal Financial Services section of our program. Okay, back to the topics of the day. I mentioned I was going to update you on this idea to seal criminal records, many criminal records, not all, of course. Governor Hochul's office stopped kind of short of announcing she was on board of the legislation. This coming out yesterday evening. Governor Hochul has been working with the legislature to strengthen the Clean Slate Act. We are reviewing their most recent draft bill, so changing right up to the last minute, of course. The session ending, I believe, tomorrow, most likely. Anyway, State Senator Zelnor Meary, in an interview, said she was cautiously optimistic an agreement had been reached with a new version of the measure. The bill would seal felony criminal records for let me try that again. The bill would seal felony criminal records for misdemeanor convictions 3 years after sentencing or release from incarceration, and 8 years for felonies post-incarceration. The pending agreement does not cover sex crime convictions or Class A felonies like murder, because originally, and this is what I wanted to, insensitive employers and like that will have access to records. But the Daily Mail, I believe this, no, I'm sorry, the Daily News, it says, I think it was a little cleaner in how they had it. In the new version, murder convictions and most other Class A felonies would not be eligible to be sealed, and felons would need to be at least 8 years removed from the end of their sentences to have their records shielded. I think that's a little clearer than the piece from State of Politics. Misdemeanor convictions would be eligible to be sealed 3 years after the end of a sentence. Records would generally be sealed from the view of potential employers, but not law enforcement. Previous versions of the bill permitted felony convictions, and that was one of the big, and I still am not a fan of this, I will say, but I think the original language and the original text that we were hearing was, again, just another signal in this kind of easy on crime attitude of Albany. But previous versions of the bill permitted felony convictions, including for murder and other Class A felonies, to be sealed after 7 years. So you can understand why there was some outrage there. As in past drafts, the edited legislation excludes sex crimes. So we'll keep you updated on that if we hear anything, and I'm hoping next week we can get some things scheduled with our assemblymen, state senators, and the light to talk about the end of session. I'll keep you updated on that. Since I'm mentioning Albany, and I don't want to rush through this too fast, and I'm sorry I don't have anything up on the screen, but it was from various outlets this morning. You know how often I've said on this program where if we've got to watch what California does, because if California does it, no matter what we think of what it is, most likely New York will follow, and sometimes it's vice versa. It's just like, in the city, you see a lot of the initiatives that have come out of California being implemented. Well, state legislature planned to pass a bill this week to create a commission tasked with studying the history of slavery and racial discrimination in New York, okay? And recommending possible reparations payments. That's interesting because if you look at Gavin Newsom, who's really in the news right now because he's going after the governor of California, he's going after Ron DeSantis about the illegal immigrants that are being sent to California. And we may have an opportunity to talk about that a little bit later on in the program. But once this went through and they had their discussion on reparations and they came to a somewhat conclusion of what they believe, this panel believed should happen, Gavin Newsom didn't seem to be so supportive of it. I could be wrong. I could have missed an update there, but he didn't seem to be as vocal. New York has accounting it must do, said Senator James Sanders out of Queens. If we are ever going to be the America for everybody, then we have to come to grips with America's original sin, slavery. New York would be the second major state, okay, this is what I was mentioning, to study whether to issue reparations. In 2020, California created a task force to study reparations, and now it is grappling over whether to issue some residents as much as $1.2 million in reparations payments. Now, it doesn't have, this is coming from Political, it does not have what the final projections of what that would cost the state of California, but it'll be interesting to see if New York heads in that same direction, if that's where we go with the task force, to see the cost, because it wasn't sustainable for California. We know how we're doing in New York. We've been talking about the budget. We've been talking about the financial state, the economic state of New York. So I thought if you've been paying attention to those stories coming out, basically California, New York looking to do the same. One other more of a local issue, though it doesn't specifically mention Chemung County and some of the surrounding counties that issued a state of emergency when it came to the migrant issue. A federal judge has announced that those emergency orders are unconstitutional. A federal judge ruled the other day that the states of emergency declarations by Rockland and Orange counties to prevent New York City from renting rooms to migrants or the asylum seekers, or whatever language the article wants to use, who have just recently arrived in the city, are unconstitutional. The court found those orders intentionally discriminate against the plaintiffs and violate their rights to travel freely within New York State. According to the ruling, the emergency orders expressly classify persons based on national origin and alienage, and contemporaneous comments made by county officials suggest discriminatory motive. Now, I know there's already been talks of appealing this. These, again, are, because we were not on the program yesterday, are kind of updating you on various issues that have been unfolding the last few days. Okay, we're going to take another break. By the way, weigh in on any of these. What is your thought on these issues? And we're glad to be back up and running again here on Frankly Speaking. We have so much to talk about. So let's take that break before I run too late. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio on a very kind of smoky Market Street this morning. Again, I'm not sure if you can see the orangeness out there, but of course that's a topic we've all been talking about. If you're ever curious, what the media and some of the far left think of conservatives, I think a prime example is the Southern Poverty Law Center. They very often go after conservative organizations, or I should say, they'll highlight them as extreme, they'll say, and then the media runs with it. And there's been a lot of issues with the Southern Poverty Law Center. I'll let you do the research on their background and some of their history. But if you're ever curious what they think about you, and I know this is a topic we've talked about on the program a lot, and people have reached out to me specifically to talk about, and that is parents' rights groups that feel that, and rightfully so, that they should have a say in their child's education. Well, Southern Poverty Law Center has now deemed parents' rights groups as hate and extremism. Now, they've counted 733 hate groups in 2021. That number has increased to 1,225 hate and anti-government extremist groups. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I believe the Tea Party at one point was labeled under this as well. At the forefront of the mobilization is Moms for Liberty, which is a Florida-based group. Quote, the group hijacks meetings, preventing officials and parents from conducting their normal proceedings. Heaven forbid. So, I mean, if you apply that definition of disrupting meetings and preventing officials and parents from conducting their normal proceedings, what would you call these various protests of perhaps conservative speakers, or just speakers that faculty and students at colleges disagree with? Those have gotten violent, but I'll continue. there was a response to this. Moms for Liberty co-founder Tiffany Justice and Tina Descovich blasted the decision. 2/3 of Americans think that public education system is on the wrong track today. That is why our organization is devoted to empowering parents to be a part of their child's public school education. This is our fundamental goal, which began just 2 years ago. Isn't that hard to believe? But yes, when teachers' unions locked students out of schools during the pandemic, and the back and forth with communications, that's very accurate. Empowering parents continues to be our mission today, and that has fueled our organization's growth like wildfire to now 45 states in the country. Name-calling parents who want to be a part of their child's education as hate groups or bigoted just further exposes what this battle is all about. Who fundamentally gets to decide what is taught to our kids in school, parents or government employees? We believe that parental rights do not stop at the classroom door, and no amount of hate from groups like that is going to stop that. So I know that was a little bit different from what's in the national news, but I wanted to bring that to your attention. All right, let's talk about the presidential races. There's a lot going on there. First of all, let's start on a more, I don't know, what's the word I want to use? A different note than you're going to see elsewhere, okay? That is RFK Jr. This coming from the New York Post editorial board. But RFK Jr. has the White House sweating, and rightly so. When you think he started off with 20% as a fringe candidate, and the media has done everything they can to, of course, portray him as anti-vax, which he's not pro-vax, but portray him as a conspiracy theorist, try to highlight quotes that are not the best look. But it has a lot of people worrying when he came out with that 20% number. People who shout, "The emperor has no clothes," have an impact. And that's what RFK Jr. is doing. He had I think, a very good speech or an interview I saw the other day speaking out about gun rights and supporting gun rights, saying there's no question that it's a constitutional right. So what the Biden administration is essentially doing is relying on their allies in the media, which is pretty much most media, to attack RFK Jr. And it's not that difficult to do with some of the things he said in the past, but even maybe more so than, like, let's say, Marianne Williamson. She's polling at 8%. They don't really necessarily even talk about her, even though she's had some very interesting things to say in the past, as well as she was very, very critical, let me reword that, of the media after her last run. Biden's record is beyond atrocious. And at 80, he's showing signs of serious decline. Voters, most definitely including Democrats, know this. It's been a regular story behind the scenes, not in the mainstream media, of course. If you saw the New York Times, we haven't had a chance to talk about it because we haven't been on the air. The New York Times addressed Biden's health, his recent falls, and did it in such a slobbering manner, I think was the term others used, to just try to portray it as nothing to see here. He's doing great when he needs to do great. I guess sometimes when you're president of the United States and you happen to be a Democrat, sometimes the media coverage, not sometimes, all the time, is very glowing, even in pieces that are not typically supposed to shine a positive light on you, like in that case. But anyway, I got on a tangent there. So someone as, and this is New York Post's definition, so someone as flaky as RFK Jr. starts to look appealing. That's how bad that Biden is looking, again, from the Post editorial board. Per the latest CNN survey, President Biden gets only 60% support from Democrats. That's not good for a sitting president. And 42% of those say they might ultimately go with someone else. And I wonder if, and this is just a little mind game for a second, do you think that's why Gavin Newsom is going after Ron DeSantis? Now, some would argue maybe just going after Ron DeSantis because he wants to knock DeSantis down a peg and maybe help Biden. That may be the logic that some use. Or is Newsom seeing an avenue here, because there's been a lot of talk of him running for president, he wants it horribly, that he might, quote unquote, replace Biden? Could that be a decision being discussed behind closed doors? Because his hypocrisy in this fight as well against DeSantis is kind of stunning, but again, not surprising. So anyway, another tangent there. So you add RFK's 20% support, and let's say those other people, the 42% who said that they may ultimately go, and this again, Democrats who may ultimately go with somebody other than Biden, that puts RFK at 64%. So this has the Biden administration, those in the White House, a little concerned. You talk about Biden's gaffes and his physical stumbles, which we have in the past. But I think to voters, more so even than that maybe, is what? The record inflation, soaring gas, energy costs, declining real wages, and as the Post said, the border nightmare, the Afghan rollout, rising racial, social, and political division, all problems that Biden's fed into or directly caused, like with Afghan, and you show the weakness across the international scene as well. And then you talk about energy costs and soaring gas. I saw today, not that I meant to keep going on this on just a article about RFK Jr., but the Biden administration is preparing to target Americans' gas furnaces amid the stove crackdown. So it's not just your stoves, and we know what we're dealing with here in New York State as well, but it's not just your stoves, it's your gas furnaces as well. You think of the costs of that. So you can understand why this administration is concerned about a Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Campaign, but also what that signals if someone else may be more, for lack of a better word, viable candidate. Not to say that RFK Jr. is not viable, as we're seeing with these numbers, but maybe a more viable candidate if we're to enter the race and say, no, enough is enough. RFK's message now, and Democrat voters, is that the party needs a better candidate than Biden. And you got to say, he's not taking this lightly. He's been giving interviews. I think he was on Elon Musk's Twitter program recently. That might have even been where I heard about the Second Amendment. But he's been active, and that could only potentially chip away at Biden even more so and get more than that 20%. Now, again, if you have not heard, Vice President Mike Pence, former Vice President Mike Pence, declared early this morning, through a video that he is running for President of the United States. This coming off the heels of Chris Christie's announcement yesterday. That's what we're going to talk about next. And again, as always, you can weigh in on this. It feels good to be back. And again, we apologize to our guests, Chris Brewer and Mary Myers Shearing, both from Steuben County, for not being able to have their interview because of those technical issues. But one more time before we go to break, there is all the information you need to know about the topic they were going to discuss, which is the input sessions for the comprehensive plan, the first comprehensive plan for Steuben County. There's, I believe, 9 issues that they're focused on, and those 9 issues came from the last input session. So this really is about community input, hearing from what you, the Steuben County residents, have to say about what direction we should be headed down in our first ever comprehensive plan. So yes, obviously you missed Tuesday, but you've got Thursday there, which if you want to travel to Wayland, depending on where you're at in our viewership, or at the Steuben County Annex Building. And I hope that you can make it out, because all you have to do is from 2 to 6. You just go in, there's Post-it notes, you say what you like, you say what you don't like. It's not a lecture series, or it's not a town hall format. They make it very easy for you and your time to make it quick and easy. There we go. Now, stay with us. We'll be right back. And frankly speaking, here on WYDC TV, Big Fox, a lot more to cover, so don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio on a smoky day here on Marcus Street. Here's my contact information, because we received so many messages during that last segment that I'm going to go through a few of them now, and as I read them, because I did not have time to put them up on the screen, you can reach out as well. Okay, are these policies supposed to unite the U.S.? Division is a result I see. Exactly. Whether it's something as simple as going after, as I said, as the Biden administration is doing, targeting your gas furnaces, after they're also targeting your stove. Yes, everything seems to divide us more. You talk about, which we'll talk about here in a second, that someone just mentioned, the study into reparations in New York State. There seems to be so many decisions coming, whether it's from Albany or whether it's from Washington, to divide us even further. Okay, let's see. If the U.S. is going to issue reparations to all it has wronged, then there would be only the handful of indigenous people left on its land. Don't punish current taxpayers for our ancestors' wickedness. Address and correct the unjust policies and institutions that have oppressed. Thank you very much. Here's another. Lawmakers and executive idiots, that might be a little biased, should be unconstitutional for saying the state of emergency for migrants isn't constitutional. That's I hope that is appealed because it has further consequences. So I appreciate that. Here's something interesting. RFK is being censored. I think there's a point to that. I mean, they sometimes mention him, but it's normally if there was not a gaffe, but you remember when he said something to the extent of that he talks to dead people in his prayers or his meditation daily, and then he had to come back out and say, well, they're not answering back. It's just a part of my meditation process. But yes, they seem to want to highlight the negatives. Continuing, RFK is being censored. Sad when truth is conspiracy and lies are expected to be believed as truth. Very good point. And finally, and I'm glad this was mentioned, and I don't think I had an opportunity to talk about it last week. It may have been something I wanted to mention yesterday. I heard something scary. This again from viewers just like you, so you can contact me there. I heard something scary the other day. Kamala Harris might step down and Barack Obama will run with Biden as VP. You know, I heard that as well. I will say the website it was coming from when it was first voiced, it was more of that person's opinion. But I do think there's a point to be had there if the numbers really start dwindling, or maybe you see Michelle Obama. It could be very interesting what happens when those polls continue to either drop his approval ratings, or if they don't see any real avenue for victory. And it depends, too, on what happens in the Republican primary. I think, much like Hillary in the past, they are overconfident that they could beat the former president. Hillary, of course, beating him as candidate, but former President Trump. But will it be Trump? There's nothing to say that that's a guarantee. I personally don't think it's going to be Chris Christie, who announced yesterday, but I do think, a Mike Pence, I don't know. His poll number's not doing that great. Tim Scott is a good candidate. Nikki Haley is a good candidate. Of course, Ron DeSantis is the one everybody's talking about. Will he be able to get over the finish line? So that depends a lot on what happens with Biden's decisions and all of this. But yes, I did hear that as well. And again, I think it's a little preemptive, but crazier things probably have happened, or at least have been discussed behind the scenes. Let's put it that way. So I mentioned Chris Christie. The media loves him. Everything I saw last night, early this morning, it was all focused on his nasty attacks on Trump. And that's really, to his point, that's the candidate he's playing. Chris Christie has said, I'm going to go after Trump. That is going to be my job here. He called Trump a self-serving mirror hog. And that does not make you a leader. I would say, I'm not going to get into the hog and the name calling like that. I would say with Chris Christie, I believe he is self-serving. I think much like the Scarborough effect, where you have a certain political belief, but then you become a pundit, then you become, in Chris Christie's case, someone that's looking for that attention maybe he once had as governor. And this is early on, so whatever. But I believe that Chris Christie has that streak of self-serving, and I think this race proves it, because did I not see? Yes. Chris Christie is polling at 1%. And now I like to be fair here on the program, and I will say when Governor Cuomo, former Governor Cuomo, now disgraced Governor Cuomo, when he was talking about running, I would have a field day because he was at 1% or less. And that goes to show you what happens, much like former Governor Christie, when you are surrounded by yes men. And you are being told that what you're saying is, brilliant, and you're the only one that can change politics. And I think that's a little bit of what we see here. So I thought it was interesting that he used the term self-serving. But anyway, he went after, and I don't understand the reference. I'm not going to knock everything Chris Christie does, but he did say, for those of you who have read the Harry Potter books, like Voldemort, he who shall not be named. I find it sometimes weird when politicians make pop culture references, though I do know Harry Potter is very dated in that sense. But yes, Christie is currently polling at 1%, but I would ask you the question. when you watch the news coverage last night or maybe early this morning, depending on when you watch your news, hopefully you just get it from Frankly Speaking. That's what I would highly recommend. But if you do go elsewhere, do you feel the coverage that he received was a coverage a candidate would get that is polling around 1% by Real Clear Politics? Do you feel that Nikki Haley, she got an okay amount? Tim Scott has not gotten very much attention. Well, let's face it, going back to that gentleman's point, or viewer's point, I should say, RFK Jr. hasn't received that kind of attention from the mainstream media. But everywhere I turned was and why? Why was all the attention on Chris Christie? It's as simple as he knows it, and he said as much in his speech, because he's going to go after the former president. So we have more to talk about with Chris Christie, some other issues here as well, maybe some on Newsom's feuding with DeSantis. DeSantis not getting good coverage, of course, but not as much. The media, I don't think, know how to handle him quite yet. So we'll talk maybe about that when we come back. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We received another comment during break. We've got a lot of great comments this morning. This one's doesn't surprise me in any kind of bias way or something. I'm intrigued by how many people are reaching out about RFK Jr. That's very interesting. Kennedy is the best candidate that would unite the country, says this viewer, because he is using common sense. Could you imagine if he teamed up with President Trump? Interesting. We're getting some really interesting, and that's what I like about this program. We talked about it in the past. I'm not going to belabor this because I have to take a quick break, but it's about community, right? And that's why I like the fact that this program offers an outlet for all different opinions. And again, if I don't always have an opportunity to read your comments, it's not because of any other reason than we're out of time, or maybe the topic was no longer relevant to the next day's program, whatever the case may be, or maybe just a quick blurb that didn't necessarily fit the show. But I appreciate all of these comments and questions that we've received in the past. Let's take a short break. This one's just real quick. I know I'm moving fast, but I'll have a little more time on the back end to get to some more topics, but we just got to play a little catch up. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking. Back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. We were talking about Chris Christie polling at 1%, getting a lot of attention. But as I mentioned earlier this morning, Mike Pence announced that he's running for president as well. But I go back and whatever you want to call it, just a thought in my mind. Why is Governor Newsom, going after DeSantis? Does he see that avenue where he could take the mantle from Biden? Maybe they say, well, Biden, step down and we'll do it this way. That would be tough too, because you'd almost have to pick Harris, and no one would be happy with, at least polling a show would not be happy with Harris. I can't say no one. That's obviously a generality, but the polls show that Kamala Harris would not be a favorite. But does Newsom see an opportunity here? Because he called Governor DeSantis a small, pathetic man, and was talking about charging him with kidnapping because of his shipping DeSantis the illegal immigrants to California, calling it a stunt, calling for kidnapping. But again, the New York Post had a really good point from the editorial board, saying Newsom fights for migrant justice sometimes. So he's been taking really swings and misses at DeSantis. And he doesn't care how factually incorrect he is being with what he's saying. But there's a reason why Newsom's doing it. But anyway, after 2 planes landed a few dozen migrants in Sacramento, Newsom suggested kidnapping charges, calling it the Attorney General Rob Bonta wrung his hands how immoral and disgusting it was what DeSantis was doing. Well, first you ask yourself, like the Post does, what about all the charities that do that? And you don't recall any similar Newsom howls, as they put here, over the not-so-secret flights that brought migrants to New York and other states in the dead of the night because President Joe Biden said to do so. Not to mention, Newsom's fury over a few dozen migrants was not a single word about the tens of thousands flooding into New York and other cities outside of California. The truth beneath all this disingenuous whining, Unchecked inflows of illegal migrants are dangerous and unacceptable. It is immoral and disgusting to lure people here, then leave them to fend for themselves. Dems like Newsom admit this, but only raise public hell when the results of their insane policies land on their own doorsteps. And that was the point behind the Martha's Vineyard move, really, is to show the hypocrisy of those like Newsom. Newsom not long ago was running ads declaring California a far better place to move than Florida, another way that he could take a dig at DeSantis. Yet he insists being moved to the Golden State is a harrowing experience now. Interesting. What will he choose next week? All right, we got to take a short break. Stay with us. Then we will wrap things up here on Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV. Big Fox, we'll be right back. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. We are just about out of time. There is an article just to tie in what we were just talking about with Newsom and DeSantis from Betsy McKay from the New York Post. Killer MS-13 gangsters are being bussed into our communities as minors. This is a really fascinating piece. Some of the specifics I wasn't going to be able to get into anyway. Because she describes some of the crimes and many may not know that the gang's rule is, quote, kill, rape, control. That's their, for lack of a better term, mantra. And they've had numerous instances in New York City alone, 65 prosecuted murders since 2009 linked to this MS-13. And they're being not vetted, was not the right way to say that, but they're not being vetted as they're coming across the border, and then they're going to see an uptick in this. Any migrant under 18 or pretending to be gets kid glove treatment. Now that's why you see unaccompanied minor numbers have surged 400% under Biden. About 30% of MS-13 gang members, Immigration and Customs Enforcement arrested in recent years entered America as unaccompanied minors. It's a racket, she says. If you're thinking kids with teddy bears, you're mistaken. Of course, that's how the media portrays it. More than 70% of actual unaccompanied minors are teens aged 15 to 17, and some adults falsely posing as minors. It goes through some of the specifics of this. You can find that at the New York Post. Oh, I know I had said that I thought maybe they're going to go after him as speaker, but I see that certain Republicans, the Boeberts and the Gates, they went after McCarthy in a different way. I thought they'd try to get him off as speaker and make it, or at least attempt to have it be somebody else, but they did block those bills from reaching the House floor in protest of the debt deal that was out yesterday. So we just don't have time to talk about all of that. Again, I want to thank, even though we were not able to speak with them because it was not timely, Chris Brewer, the Steuben County Deputy County Manager. I'm gonna ask him and Mary Myers-Shearing, the planning director, to come back on the program soon. Maybe we could talk about how the input sessions went. Again, it's not too late to have your voice heard. There is the information right there on Thursday. We obviously missed the Tuesday ones. That's why the interview is no longer relevant. But Thursday, we have those two opportunities to weigh in on the Steuben County Comprehensive Plan. You just walk in, you have some sticky notes of what you like, you don't like, maybe give your opinion on a couple of them, and there you go. It's simple as that. There's no real time to kill there. It's a quick and easy event. Well, thank you for joining us. It's good to be back. We have so much more to cover, and that's why you have to tune in tomorrow, because it's going to be a fun one tomorrow too, folks. So this has been Frankly Speaking. I'm your host, Frank Acom. I hope to see you tomorrow morning starting at 7 a.m. right here on WYDC TV, Big Fox.